I went to the doctor. I went to the mountains. I looked to the children. I drank from the fountains. There's more than one answer to these questions pointing me in a crooked line. And the less I seek my source for some definitive, the closer I am to find.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Virtue Signal, the podcast about how to be moral in amoral times, themed by Alex Rancourt. My name is Eleanor Russell. I'm here with Taylor Meanswell.
We open today with a passage from the Tao de Dyke, a.k.a. Closer to Find by the Indigo Girls.
And we're here also with Andre Kello.
Hello, everybody. And I did recognize what those lyrics
too.
were.
Let's talk about the Tao Te Ching. My first reaction to this text, which I hadn't read in a very long time, was that this is very much obviously correct. And I also can't do it. I functionally cannot do the things that it asks of me to do. And I don't know what to do with that.
Well, I'm no expert on the text. I don't think any of us are. I read it when I was a kid, same as a lot of people. Read it again this last week, a couple of times, different translations. I don't know what it says. It's beautiful poetry. And I mean, I get the general idea as it's, related to things like other intellectual traditions like Zen Buddhism or, any of the kind of like Gnostic Gospels or other, there's a lot of ideas all around the world that interconnect with the stuff that's in this text, but I'm no expert. I think that we're probably just going to engage with this text today as a book that we read.
It reminded me a little bit of The Medium is the Message in terms of its relationship to
Marshall McLuhan's Medium of the Message. Canadian.
It's not a dialectic. It's a dyad, I guess.
Well, it's a monad, and it's also a dyad, and it's also because it's the
number 4 is important too.
The first thing is the one, right? The Tao. And then from the one comes the two, and from the two comes the three, and from the three comes the myriad things.
The reason I say dyad is like a sort of like not. It's a dialectic with no
synthesis.
Synthesis.
Yeah.
It's a dialectic with no synthesis.
It's the opposite of synthesis. It's the one thing producing two.
It's a little bit like decreation, which is the Simone Weil thing, but also not really because it's not really nihilistic in that way. Anyway, I wanted to read this passage. It's chapter 2, and which I always feel nervous whenever I quote something early in the text because it makes it look like I didn't read the whole thing. Like when in my work, I'll cite something from the first page of something, and it's like, what if people think I only read the first page? And it's like, sometimes that's true, sometimes it's not. In this case, it's not. Anyway, chapter 2. As soon as beauty is known by the world as beautiful, it becomes ugly. As soon as virtue is being known as something good, it becomes evil. Therefore, being and non-being give birth to each other. Difficult and easy accomplish each other. Long and short form each other. High and low distinguish each other. Sound and tone harmonize each other. Before and after follow each other as a sequence. Realizing this, the saint performs effortlessly according to the natural way without personal desire, and practices the wordless teaching through one's deeds. The saint inspires the vitality of all lives without holding back. He nurtures all beings with no wish to take possession of. He devotes all his energy but has no intention to hold on to the merit. When success is achieved, he seeks no recognition because he does not claim for the credit and shall not lose it. Ugh, I love that. I think that's stunning. That's so beautiful and correct.
I think that's beautiful, and I'm actually glad that you wanted to start there because so did I, right? One of the central, as a Westerner who has engaged with Eastern philosophy a little bit throughout my life, one of the first things that they try to imprint upon you, it would seem, is this nature of duality, right? That the light defines the darkness. It'll go on to say later about the relationship between the form and the void, and how these things are perhaps, like we just said, one thing. They're two things birthed from one.
And this, the primacy of the one thing. When I was reading it just now, it made me think about Spinoza
Yeah.
and the concept of the monad and the idea that differentiation is a thing that we do and it's bad. But I was hoping we could start by going over a little bit of context for the text itself, the historical context.
Okay.
If that's all right with you.
Sure.
China is the country in the middle of the map.
It's the big one.
Yeah. But there was no China, as we understand it at the time, because this book comes as a result of the Warring Kingdoms period of the 5th century BC. This is a time when there are a lot of different ideological systems that are sort of fighting with each other and influencing each other. It's called the 100 strands of thought, right? The 100 schools of thought. That this period, you've got legalism, and you've got Confucianism, and you've got Mohism, which is the teachings of Moji, and then in addition to that, you have Taoism, and Taoism is itself a syncretic process of transforming other kinds of thought, both religious and philosophical, that have been developing in this area.
It also reminds me and speaks in sort of alchemical terms as well.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing, is that after this book, then there's this school of Taoism called Huang Lao. And Huang Lao, which comes after the Tao Te Ching, is a kind of Taoism that involves metaphysics and spiritual, concepts about gods and magic and the idea of the pursuit of immortality.
At some point, Taoism does have things in common with what we would call a religion or a belief system closer to what we imagine in the West, right? Even though we don't, as Westerners, engage with it on that basis.
Yeah.
In practical terms, the immediate follow-up is there's like systems of thought and belief, right, which come across as religion, but then also as philosophy, much the way that, in the early modern period, right, there's an enormous amount of theological development trying to codify a lot of complex religious questions for Christianity. And, at different times in history, there are all these different religions that go through this period of like philosophical refinement. But then also there's the practices, right? The everyday religious ceremonies and the relationship to things like medicine and, and politics. So it is an incredibly complicated network of not just ideas, but also traditions and very real daily practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a way in which, like, compared to like Christianity or Judaism or even Islam, the role of writing and of texts in this is not like centralized. It's just like part of it. It's like we have these texts in order to identify the practices that we should be performing. It's not so much like the text itself is like really important. It's more like a processing or a guide that you then sort of throw away once you eventually achieve what you need to achieve.
And it's also, like I said before, it's syncretic. It's like the result of hundreds of years of development of other ideas and practices from, local communities, indigenous traditions and things. And then it continues to develop and change as time goes by afterward. So can I put it into a little bit of historical context?
Please do.
Okay. So in the 5th century BC, BCE, however you want to do it, there is this sort of idea happening in different parts of the world all at the same time. Mm-hmm. So
there's a word for that when like something happens.
Oh, parallel development.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
parallel thinking, they call it in my industry.
Lao Tzu, the credited author, there is debate as to whether this book was written in Lao Tzu's lifetime, when Lao Tzu lived. You know, was this the product of people refining things that he had written in the past? Was Lao Tzu even a guy? Now, this is a book that may or may not have been written in the 5th century and is possibly a source for the ideas that appear around the same time in Ecclesiastes. Now, something that is interesting about Ecclesiastes, which was written in the 5th century BC, or later, possibly, based on the timing of the historical record of Ecclesiastes, more or less hinges on the presence in the original text of Persian loanwords.
That's cool.
Indicating that this was written after the Babylonian captivity. And the text, it's possible, was written by somebody named Kohelet, and that is a woman's name. But, you know, thousands of years of religious scholars have said things like, well, you know, this is a name that refers to a person who maybe is like engaging in ideas of femininity and therefore isn't necessarily a woman, blah, blah, blah. A lot of like making excuses for
don't
white
gatekeep.
Yeah.
Right.
True scum. 5th century true scum.
So Kohelet may have been a woman, and Lao Tzu may have been a woman. The name Lao Tzu means old boy. And a lot of the stories of Lao Tzu are, this is a person who seemingly was always old, maybe lived for 1,000 years, and had a kind, there's documents indicating this person had a feminine appearance and voice.
Okay.
And was called old boy because continued to have a high voice even at old age.
Okay.
So Lao Tzu might have been a woman. Kohelet might have been a woman. Lao Tzu might even have written Ecclesiastes.
That's fucking crazy.
Yes.
Hold on. I'm gonna pause you there. Is that an extrapolation you're making, or is that suggested by evidence?
The evidence that exists currently is that these ideas that were written down at either the beginning or the middle of the 5th century BC do appear in Persia and other places that were the places where Ecclesiastes was being written.
And that those places, the late Babylonian era, for instance, would have had contact with what we now call the Far East.
Well, yeah, I mean, there was a lot of...
Is this Silk Road era? No, that came much later.
It came much later, yes. No, there was trade. There wasn't... like, in the 5th century BC, you have the Olmecs in Mexico, and they're probably not experiencing a lot of cultural interchange with ancient China. But... India is, right? And India is trading with Persia. And, Persia is interacting with various places in Egypt and in Greece and in other places like this. Now, in Greece, at the exact same time, is the life of Socrates. Socrates is alive and writing and teaching people. Almost everything everything we've got from Socrates comes from other people, not from him. The same way that we don't know for sure that Lao Tzu wrote this stuff. Right? And also the Buddha dies in 400 BC. Right? So the Buddha's entire lifespan more or less takes place in the 5th century BC. So these ideas that we're talking about are somehow happening in significant swaths of the world all at the same time.
That much, it appears, is evidenced.
Okay.
And this is also, as Eleanor can explain, contemporaneous with Greek theater.
Yes.
Sophocles, Aeschylus, all these people are in the 5th century BC.
Yeah.
And what are some? I'm ignorant.
Also, Mahariva and Jainism is at the same time.
I'm ignorant to the Old Testament, to be honest. What are some of the are you able to describe the book of Ecclesiastes for me?
I think the thing that everybody remembers from Ecclesiastes is there is a season, turn.
That was going to be my second gag where I read the lyrics of a song as though it's the Tao Te Ching. I have it in my tabs right now.
Yeah, that's Ecclesiastes.
And that there's a passage
Time to
very
be born.
similar.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm on board now. Okay. I'm on board.
Yes. So, like, Ecclesiastes has a different tone from other books of the Bible. Mm-hmm. You know, it is like a lot of the Old Testament is do this and do that, and if you don't, I will shove a lightning bolt up your ass. And then here's Ecclesiastes saying, you know what, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. Just relax. You know, you worry too much.
Yeah.
Just everything will work out. There's sometimes people die, sometimes people are born. It's fine.
And that I know that song as a Shaker song.
Well, yeah, I mean, the Shakers would have been familiar with the Bible.
Well, yeah, but I mean, like, specifically, like, that is, like, emblematic of, like, a Shaker mindset.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I think that, like, these ideas are pretty old and are present in more or less every religion in the world.
Yeah.
You know, this idea that there is the unity.
Because it's true, you know?
Right.
That's the thing about stuff that's true, is that people figure it out, you know?
Parallel thought.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Yeah. You know, what's interesting is when you talk about this, like, historical context, when I was learning about Tao and also, well, actually really Buddhism, when I was learning about that in college, I was like, oh, this is semiotics. Like, that's what I learned. I was like, oh, this is like an aesthetic theory of knowledge.
It definitely reads like a slightly more esoteric version of the kind of thing that you read from continental philosophers in the 20th century.
Yeah. It's like, this is an aesthetic theory. It's really cool. Yeah.
We balk at those who believe, and I'm the one who's like on schizo TikTok the most of the three of us, I think, but we balk at those who believe that like ancient civilizations had some kind of hidden technology.
No.
And
That is
there's
a fantasy.
truth that we're waiting to like rediscover.
No.
And that's true. There's not like ancient alien Stargate tech buried in the desert somewhere. But this notion that you bring up of like these people hundreds and hundreds of years ago reaching the same conclusions that the Frankfurt School goes on to reach.
This is like why every old philosopher, like when a philosopher gets old, they always go back to the Greeks. It's like their thing is they're like, well, the Greeks were doing it. I mean, it's all there. It's just all there. It's like, why don't like, I'm one of my like things that I'm incredibly critical of is how people talk about postmodernism as like a thing that was new. And I'm like, postmodernity is a temporal period that erupted, but postmodernism as a formalism has existed as long as there has been an inside outside. And inside outside was what the Greeks were obsessed with.
Do you mean postmodernism in the sense of like the assertion of irony and chaos?
Yes, yes. And disorder and disarray and destruction and deconstruction. That's outside inside. That's troubling the periphery. And that's what people have been obsessed with forever. That's what the history of theater is about. That's why we're constantly shutting down the theaters and then reopening them again. Because theater is like, what if inside outside is actually more complicated, you know? And that's where we get Aristotelian ethics and Aristotelian rules of decorum and aesthetics, where it's like, here's the act structure, here's how nothing goes from outside, here's how inside outside doesn't get troubled and incoherent. And as long as we keep inside outside as inside outside, everything's going to be fine. The king won't kill us.
But I think that the text of the Tao Te Ching says that the inside is the outside and the outside is the inside, and that
yes,
if the king kills you, you've also killed the king. And you know, I think that you can look at the ideas here as being, you know, supportive of the Zhou dynasty specifically, right? Saying you don't have to fight to create some kind of revolution, to destroy the world, to make things the way that they ought to be. Just relax. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
You know, it's working hard and striving and trying and like struggling, right? All the characteristics of dialectical materialism as we understand it, right? Mm-hmm. That stuff is all bad and leads to like not being at peace with the universe. What you should do is, as an individual, strive to connect to this sort of like unified hierarchy that goes all the way from individual people on the ground through the earth into heaven and then up to the Tao.
Yeah, and like to Taylor's point, the reason that people want to fantasize that there is some sort of like ancient aliens or like secret like Rosetta Stone to like unlock, you know, how we should behave and like understand the world is because people are afraid and know that they can't figure that out themselves. So they have to believe that someone has figured it out before them. And it's just a matter of discovery rather than creation. Mm-hmm. And that's I get it. That's like a very human impulse.
With classicalism, right?
Yeah.
Not to mention
that's exactly right.
Not to mention the call for a return to a lost past being a characteristic of all forms of reaction throughout history, right?
There is actually like a weird tendency I see amongst like academics who are historians is that there was like, I'm a student of history. And I'm like, okay, great. Yeah, we're all students of history. But they do sometimes kind of reify that parochial mindset where it's like, well, you know, as Plato said, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, yeah, but also you're using that to cope a little bit, you know? Like, let's research with Mama. Let's come up with our own ideas with Mama, you know?
Well, I think that one thing that the Tao rejects is the idea that anything new can happen.
Exactly. Which is like...
It makes sense to me, considering that it is a school of thought that is the result of hundreds or thousands of years of development across an enormous population, right? It's like it's deeply tied into the bureaucracy and the legal system and the power structures of the political struggles of the warring states period, where there was an enormous anxiety about like what was going to happen next. There was a lot of question, like, is the Zhao dynasty gonna like continue and rule for another several thousand years, or is it going to be overtaken and destroyed? And
well, yeah, and I think that like structurally and like platonically, literally, yes, nothing can ever be new. That's it. I get that.
We see that in the Bible. There's nothing new under the sun.
That's
right?
Fundamentally true. What can be new is an experience to an individual, or perhaps a community or a relationship. That's what I think, is you can experience the feeling of newness even if the thing that you're experiencing is not new.
Well, yeah. But I think that the text kind of rejects the idea that individuals in their difference have any kind of value to impart to the whole. It seems like the difference between the individual and the whole is the source of individual suffering and is the thing to be conquered.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, and the attachment to being one side or the other of that polarity is a source of suffering as well, right? Mm-hmm. To say to yourself, I'm this and not this, is opening the door to suffering, according to the
this brings up a very interesting point to me. Now, in our understanding of like Marxist thought, right, you've got this thing where people want stuff, and the fact that they can't have it causes a revolution. Mm-hmm. Right? And that's the haves and the have-nots, right? And it's the fact that the have-nots desire to have that is the motivating force for, as far as Marx is concerned, all of history.
Yeah.
Right?
Absence leads to desire, right?
Now, Taoism presents a kind of ideology for the people, which says the desiring is the problem. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, we, as capitalists, we can't say that desiring is the problem, because your whole economic system stops working. People stop wanting and purchasing and consuming things, right? So we can't preach, you shouldn't spend money. Our entire economy is based around people like recklessly spending too much money, going to extraordinary debt. And, like if they don't, the economy collapses, right? People start paying off their debt, the economy collapses, mm-hmm. right? But here we see this thing that's like, you as an individual, you shouldn't consume, you shouldn't want, you shouldn't desire or even struggle. Your thing is to be at peace with the environment that you are in, like a stone in a river. Mm-hmm. like wind blowing through the trees, right? You are not, your individuality is only a problem for you to overcome.
And they keep going back to that imagery. That's the poetic method of it, actually, the way that the poetry serves as method and not just container, which is that you are a stone in the river. The stone in the river, you can't say a stone isn't in a river. When you see a stone in a river, you're like, definitely that's a stone in a river. It's undeniable. It's empirical, right? And they use that's like a rhetorical legitimation throughout the text that the aesthetic component structure. So that's why I keep going back to it being an aesthetic theory, because the aesthetics of the poetry function as the method of the argument.
I'd like to talk about Wu Wei.
Okay. Let's go.
Trying to find a literal translation of it here. An attitude of genuine non-action motivated by a lack of desire to participate in human affairs, and a technique by which one practices it may gain enhanced control of human affairs. Do those two definitions not seem to contradict each other?
Well, it definitely doesn't make sense in a logical, like straightforward way, but you do see it in practice over and over again in like cultural
Like the
like
aesthetic?
products of Taoism.
Like the power of the ascetic kind of guy.
But just look at like stories about Taoist monks, right? How are they depicted? They don't want anything, and they are infinitely powerful. Mm-hmm. Right?
They're like superheroes.
They like stand on their head for 100 years type of thing? Is
Yeah.
that...
I mean, they're certainly close. They're close to our conception of contemporary superheroes because so much of our visual storytelling and narrative around superheroes now is informed by
Monastic practices.
and also by wuxia films, which are so heavily Taoist.
Yeah.
Right? Because they are often about monks and often about like demons and witches and things that come from the traditions of Taoism. And, I think that if you look at something like Doctor Strange in the Mountains of Madness or whatever that thing was called.
It wasn't called the Mountains.
The Multiverses of Madness.
I was like,
right?
that's a...
The Mountains of Madness is where Lao Tzu went after he wrote the Tao Te Ching.
That's where I'm going after this show.
I think that this thing where in very contemporary culture, not just superhero movies, but there is this idea of there being these like alternate universes that you swim around in, and that, like your relationship to reality is up for grabs and, can be reconsidered. And so, and then like, it's not just, Spider-Man, No Way Home. It's Everything Everywhere All at Once. And it's, all of these Groundhog's Day, sliding doors stories that we get, right? It's this thing like all of this stuff is all together.
What's funny is that like when I was listening to Taylor, when I was listening to you read that, I've talked about this in the show in the past. I have a tendency to, my first instinct is to abstract something. It's to decontextualize and supplant a new meaning onto it. So I was like, oh, that's a description of a narcissist. You know what I mean? Like my cynical brain was like, I was like, oh, it's giving my mom. Like,
So you can read the text as being an instruction manual for how to effectively live in embodying Wu Wei, right? And so the master is a character that we are constantly
Derogatory.
being described in the text.
Yeah, the master is the reader of the text, and it's trying to teach us how to do the thing.
Right, which makes it very different, say, from the way that the master is described in the Hegel that we read. Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, that's a totally different political economy, and that's so far in the future.
And also, not every translation that I read of the Tao Te Ching refers to this person as the master. At least one that I found that was free on the internet refers to this person as a saint. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, these are translation issues for sure. But we're talking about a text that's several thousand years old and has, debatable provenance, and is the product of the incorporation of ideas that existed before and then gets disseminated to other places, and then the connections between those things are unclear. I think that it's difficult to say one way or the other, what the most accurate translation is. People amongst the people who know the most, there is the most disagreement.
Isn't that I think it's just supposed to be the person that you will become, saint, master.
The master of Tao, but you're not mastering
exactly.
the Tao.
That's the idea.
Tao is mastering you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
In that way, it is, and people often describe, these ideas that became very popular in the United States of America in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s as being related to traditions of Buddhism and Taoism, as well as Hindu and other Eastern religions. And so you see it in our culture, not just in explicit references to these things, but in stuff like the Force from Star Wars.
Well, that issue in and of itself, the fact that it's but the master is not the master, sometimes you use the word saint, the words are arbitrary. We're using the word that's most useful for us in order to convey this guide. But then
the text does say that explicitly. It says the eternal name is not the name.
Exactly. And that itself is a synecdoche for the whole deal. It's here's what I'm saying is going on. Here's the dialectic without a synthesis. Here's the words that are at my disposal that I'm using in order to describe that. And then internalize it so the words don't matter anymore.
You are supposed to use the words, and this is explicitly stated by a Taoist master who wrote a contemporary text called Chuang-Tzu, who says that the word is not the point. The word is like a trap to catch a rabbit, and once you have the rabbit, you throw the trap away. Once you have the idea, you throw the words away.
Right, which is also kind of true, but in a different flavor in Christianity with the concept of the word. The word in Christianity is this ultimate truth that once you learn it, you can internalize it, metabolize it. The word itself as a linguistic phenomenon doesn't seem to matter anymore.
Yeah, I think that
language is a technology.
There's this thing about words having magic powers or holy religious significance, and the Bible itself as a text is considered this holy object that is venerated and stuff like that. But also we're talking about every religious text has been translated into every single language and often several different times. The Hebrew Bible has been translated into English itself, 100, maybe more different times that are all very significantly different from one another.
What it is, I think the method here is, do you guys know the word techne?
Oh, yeah, from ancient Greek.
Yeah, it's a skill or a craft, and it's or it's really just practical knowledge. Right. That's what I think this poem is.
Where technocracy comes from. The idea that the way that government should work is that the smartest people who know what to do should be the ones in charge.
Yeah, and I really like the term techne because it functions to reveal how works of art as techne, as practical knowledge, demystify art as some lofty, pretentious endeavor, but in fact integral and constitutive of our knowledge of life itself.
I think that the reluctance of Taoism to talk about specific interdictions, right? One big
interdictions,
rules of things you can't do.
Oh, okay.
Right. So you can't, for example, say that about Confucianism or legalism.
Interdictions? I barely did interdiction.
I'm glad we paused for that. So the Tao is specifically saying the thing that I am talking about you cannot understand, and what you need to do is get okay with that real fast.
Yeah.
Now, a law is something that you need to understand. In the very least, you need to understand what is being asked of you. Mm-hmm. And we see in the Old Testament, there are all these laws, and then there are these other parts like Ecclesiastes, right, where they say, okay, so the laws, whatever, here's the other stuff. And the other stuff, it doesn't exactly conflict with the laws, but it does create this interesting challenge of, okay, so on the one side, you're telling me that there's no way for me to, as a human, to understand God or what God wants from me. But on the other side, you're saying, if you don't do it, I will kill you.
Yeah.
Right. God is unknowable. Don't eat shellfish.
Right.
Right. Well, and I think that speaks to a practical distinction that must be made by all philosophies, religions, schools of thought between what you should do in general and in the abstract and what you should do right in front of your face, right? And I think that duality is something that, as a Westerner, I think it's difficult to apply to Taoism, to apply to doing by not doing, because it is such a like lofty abstract idea. It's hard to see how it's practical, because like every single thing that I do is me doing something, right? And so am I in constant violation of the Tao, and how am I to become into accord with it, besides like sitting still and letting moss grow over me?
I would like to speak a little bit to how this school of thought has been abused by Silicon Valley, and how it's taken this sort of radical non-doing as and interpreting it as a lack of responsibility for your own actions.
Or just the idea that there is no like rational way to make judgments of any kind about anything.
Right. You can just abdicate. Yeah.
Like you can say, who knows? And that just ends every single conversation.
Exactly.
It becomes a pretext for relativism.
Which is disgusting. And I think it's worth thinking about that a little bit.
It definitely makes it so easy for people to be smug about anything.
Yeah.
Just goes
about their
to show
curiosity too. Yeah.
you should not listen to Westerners when they talk about Eastern philosophy.
Yeah, ignore this. Do not
like,
listen
share,
to this
and subscribe
podcast.
nonetheless. But
Yeah, I don't know. I kept thinking about that when I was reading how this, especially because of how beautiful it is. And I started getting angry thinking about how someone could take something this beautiful and turn it into what the fuck they're doing in San Francisco.
But, you know, when it was written...
bad news about San Francisco, by the way.
It was all... In the 5th century BC, it was already... It was created as a tool of authority.
No, that's true. That's true. And that's true of all religions. And we need to always remember that. That is always true.
Maybe it is true or not true about all religions, but it's certainly definitely true about the Tao Te Ching.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. And you can do that to any religion. You can desecrate anything, you know.
But, you know, when I was in high school, I was an obnoxious, smarmy, smug little Zen Buddhist.
Oh, yeah. I know many of these people.
And I loved to talk to people about, you know, the dream of the butterfly and, you know, all the Taoist ideas that I learned from Lao Tse and Shuang Tse. And I didn't understand any of that shit. I still don't understand it. I think that's the idea. It can't be understood. It sort of rejects the idea that anyone could ever understand it. It's saying that the world is too complicated for the human mind. That's more or less like the central idea of it, right?
I'm just picturing Andre in high school in South Carolina being like, what is the sound of one hand clapping?
He
And
was a little bit like this when I met him when he was 25.
Some Vietnam vet is like, what the fuck did you just say, boy? And he's got like only one arm.
Yeah, not an easy place to be like vocal about non-Christian religions.
You would think that the serenity of the mountains would allow the Tao to inhabit people organically.
And the thing is, and it did. Just a few hundred miles north of me in Asheville, North Carolina, you have, you know, the John Cage and all these people at the, you know, in the mountains who are doing noise music and Fluxus stuff and, you know, teaching at Warren Wilson and like Black Mountain College and all that. And, you know, there is actually a thing about the mountains that encourages people into doing Taoism.
Yeah,
you know,
no, that's true.
we saw exactly that, and along with other Eastern traditions when we lived in Taos in New Mexico.
Unrelated to Tao. It means red willow in the language.
Taos, New Mexico, gotta be the white Buddhist capital.
Actually, what's weird
Boulder,
is
maybe?
the cults are mostly Hindu.
Interesting.
The cults are white Hindu.
There's all kinds of everybody there.
You know, it's true.
We
And it's
knew
pretty
people that were
syncretic.
deeply involved in the local Jewish community, and you know, and there were people that were very devout Christians there. The Catholicism there is very powerful, especially
Yeah, but there's a lot
politically.
of very there was this one woman, her name was Anna, and she was an artist. She was like 1,000 years old, and she was Native American Mexican woman, and she was devout Catholic, and all of her paintings were of skeletons fucking each other. It was awesome. And like cool, like Mexican, like mythology and stuff. So it was like a very syncretic kind of Catholicism.
And just the way that Catholicism in New Mexico is syncretized from the local religious traditions going back hundreds and thousands of years in Central and North America, you know, Taoism itself was the product of the incorporation of not just like philosophical ideas from lawyers and bureaucrats and philosophers and politicians, but then also the like folk magic and mythology of small town people all across Asia. And so, like Taoism says things like, it is impossible to understand and you must be calm and, try to connect to a complicated world by not being so ambitious all the time. But then it also has things like, here's a way to curse somebody so that they can't have male children.
I think what's so disturbing to me about my experience of reading this is that, like, as I'm reading it, I'm like, this is undoubtedly correct, 100%. But all I kept thinking about is how, like staying calm and, like, not stoic, but, like, non-reactive or responsive. I'm like, I thought about the state of the world and I was like, but that's what we need to react to things. Like, no one's reacting to things and that's what's going on. And then I'm like, I don't know what to do.
I would like to, yes. I'm glad you said that because there is more of a practical angle that I hope to take to this. I was exposed to the idea during my non-rigorous, non-scholarly research on this topic that when we talk about Wu Wei, somebody compared it to an athlete where
Phil Jackson was all about using this stuff in the 90s.
He's not the only one. Plenty of people.
Yeah. But my dad was reading all his books about this and got into it.
Chapter 87, the lost chapter, is actually about the triangle offense and how to control Dennis Rodman's urges.
Yes. From the 2 comes the 3, and then from the 3 comes really good spacing.
So I wanted to think about this Wu Wei from the practical aspect of it. I'm going to take a contemporary Western concept, borrowing from psychoanalysis and pop mental health understandings of the 2020s, to say that, is it possible that Wu Wei is just another way of saying, don't overthink it. Just do it and don't overthink it.
Well, I think that it is that, but it is in the service of the idea that, like, we can have ultimate authority vested in the emperor or the king without believing that this person has every answer.
So you think that this is like running cover or conditioning people to have a certain mindset toward their rulers rather than toward themselves?
I think it is both.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things about Taoism is that really deep inside of it is this idea of this hierarchy.
Interesting.
One thing I learned about, like, when you talk about Tao is that, like, a lot of people when they're teaching you, you're like, you actually don't want to call it Taoism. You want to always refer back to the Tao because you don't want to make it into, like, this encompassing, overdetermined ideology. You always want to say Tao.
Right. It's not like there's a pope of Taoism.
Right. Actually, we might elect one today. We'll see.
Me.
It's Tay-Tay. Yeah.
All right. Moved and forwarded. All right. Good.
All right.
So verse 13, there is a Shen naturally residing within. One moment it goes, the next it comes, and no one is able to conceive of it. If you lose it, you are inevitably disordered. If you attain it, you are inevitably well-ordered. Diligently clean out its lodging place, and its vital essence will naturally arrive. Relax your efforts to reflect on and control it. Be reverent and diligent, and its vital essence will naturally stabilize. Grasp it and don't let go. Then the mind and ears won't overflow. And the mind will have nothing to seek. When a properly aligned mind resides within you, the myriad things will be seen in their proper perspective. It sounds to me like they are telling you, like there's a something you have to stop doing, something we do compulsively, something that Eleanor maybe alluded to, like in your inability to follow the words of the Tao, right?
Every time I've been in, like, therapy and they're like, you should meditate, I'm like, I literally can't.
That.
I literally physically cannot do it.
No. Be present with my thoughts? No. If I could do that, I wouldn't be here.
Exactly.
I wouldn't be in therapy.
Okay, can you talk some more about these ideas about the struggle? Because I get this. I think that they wouldn't bother writing a book and continue to have people read it for thousands of years if this stuff weren't actually kind of hard to do, right? Like we tend, even non-Taoists, even people who aren't invested in Eastern religion at all, we do have a tendency to have a little bit of reverence for the people who are living the lives of these monks in these monasteries, right? About like, we do think of them as being especially wise, right? So maybe it's not supposed to be easy.
Right, but what I'm saying, it's not only not easy, it like I like cannot do any of it. Like this is a thing that the way I'm functionally unable to adopt any of its tenets.
I think of it as a striving, an inner, like a doing.
But like I can't even get close to it. Like I'm so abstracted, and like I always think of myself as just like a brain in a jar, and like it's just really hard to.
I would think that Lao Tzu would say to you that the things that you have done are the result of like you following the Tao involuntarily, right? Of the river flowing over you, the rock sitting at the bottom.
If the Tao,
and then it's your striving and your thinking and your desiring.
And then the Tao is
by
something
which
that
you have
happens
achieved.
to me.
Yeah, and it's the whole time flowing through you without your awareness.
you are part of it.
I'm gonna burst into tears.
You've been levitating this entire session,
Oh
by
my
the way.
God.
And, Eleanor just fell to the ground as soon as she noticed.
Boop.
Okay, I love that. The Tao is something that happens to you, and so in your inability, this is getting
But
very
everything
deep,
that you can possibly say about the Tao, you also have to say the opposite.
Yeah.
The Tao is flowing through you. The Tao never reaches you. The Tao is like we used to say, me and Du Bois used to say about Zen, right? Is that Zen is a clear, cool pool of water. You can enter it from any side, and it's also a tower of flame, and you can't enter it from any side, right? Like being able to internalize those kinds of contradictions is the point of like all the Zen meditation that focuses on koans, right? Like the idea being that there is this sort of like urge inside of your brain to, synthesize things. And what Taoism is trying to tell you is knock that shit off. You're only making yourself upset.
Yeah. It's just like my like Western woke moralizing brain is just reading this, and a narcissistic mind is reading this like, oh, here's all the ways in which you fucked up, Eleanor. You failed. You're fucking terrible. You'll never achieve any sort of happiness because you fucking suck. And it's like, that's the narcissism that like it's totally trying to rebuke. And I'm just like, oh, but I can't get out of it.
I think if you look at like, say, for example, there are artists, I think, contemporary artists who are more or less the people who have been holding on to the ideas of the American hippie version of Eastern thought. And like, for example, Dennis Hopper and David Lynch and, and all those people who were part of that like community in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. You ask them like, what is the self? And they say, oh, there is no self. Right. And these are just like honkies. Right. But they're like, identity is an illusion, and, striving as an individual to achieve something is pointless because you're going to die and you're really just part of something bigger than yourself, and blah, blah, blah. I imagine at some point we might discuss civilization and its discontents, and the idea that like, maybe, as Taylor is saying, Freud did connect to this thing about people being into something bigger than themselves. And, like, is the oceanic feeling the Tao? I don't know.
No, because it wouldn't be. The oceanic feeling wouldn't be the Tao. The oceanic feeling is, go.
So, in Civilization and Its Discontents, Freud says that people have this yearning to connect to something outside of themselves as a kind of antidote to the terror of knowing that they're going to die. Right.
And of just like the isolation of selfhood. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like, and it in a way is taking on the same problem as the Tao Te Ching and offering the same solution as the Tao Te Ching, which is, if you want relief from the persistent anxiety of individuality, then what you need to do is feel a strong, meaningful connection to something larger than yourself that is infinite and will exist after you're gone.
Okay, so maybe the oceanic feeling is similar to the Tao, but I do think that his method, which is psychotherapy, is not.
He's, his focus on like treating anxiety like a disease to be cured through intervention is more or less the opposite of what the Tao says, right? Like a lot of the times the Tao recognizes a kind of, even like a physiological problem, things like high blood pressure.
Yeah.
And it'll say, you know what you need to do? Chill the fuck out.
Yeah, and it's also like Freud is maybe an example of the kind of ways in which this line of thinking can be weaponized and sort of used as a tool of patriarchy, Like, you need to stop freaking out and just like achieve a
clinical inability to be in accordance with the Tao is hysteria.
Mm-hmm.
We were just
I'm
talking
glad you
about
bring
that
this up,
diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I think I'm too much of an hysteric.
Your femaleness has separated you from God's light, and that's why I'm firing up the brain drill right now. Patreon bonus subscribers get to have our bonus episode in which Eleanor is lobotomized.
Yep.
Now, What is to be Done by Lenin, I think.
You're going to say What is to be Done by Freud, and I was like, oh, does he have one?
I think it is more or less the opposite of the Tao Te Ching.
I'm obsessed with this. Go on.
The Tao Te Ching says,
Sorry.
let me be clear. You, the reader, are the problem. If you're unhappy, it's your own stupid fault. And I know you are unhappy, you moron. And what you need to do is shut up and do nothing for the rest of your life. That will at least quiet the stupid voices in your head. And
Silence 4 is a 10 is speaking.
And then Lenin says, you know what we ought to do? We ought to go find the king and put a gun to his head. And that is the kind of suggestion that you are not likely to find in the 81 verses of the Tao Te Ching.
Obsessed. We should do that. We should do What is to be Done next week. What do we think?
I don't know if our friendship can handle it.
I think it can. I know it can. It can
No, I'm just
totally.
kidding.
It can totally handle it. And if it doesn't, like that's what a hell of a way to go out,
right?
Live.
I would be very disappointed to not have an opportunity to talk about the holy sonnets of John Donne.
Oh, that's right. We'll do John Donne too. I think because of the way this episode is flowing, the river is flowing through us as stones. We should follow that.
Okay, I won't hold onto the sand in my fist, but instead I'll open my hand and allow it to flow through my fingers.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. You should do. Yeah.
I like that this came up because it was something that struck me as reading this, as how at least a surface level reading of the Tao Te Ching could strike one as anti-revolutionary or in contradiction with the trying to think of like neutral language, because I have a strong bias in this area about the revolutions of the 20th century seem to fly in the face of Wu Wei, but I wonder if that's really true. Like, are we having a oversimplified notion of the 20th century revolutions, or are we having a simplified notion of Wu Wei? Right.
Yeah.
Now, there are actually a lot of examples.
The
there are a lot of examples in Chinese literature of Taoist heroes overthrowing a corrupt leader. Mm-hmm. Now, it typically is in a more Star Wars style of like you as a revolutionary leader are kind of the tool or implement of some greater thing.
You're a tool of the Tao. The Tao is the thing that's actually doing
right.
it.
And it is the way that you are able to act without desire is through non-action. And non-action doesn't mean not doing anything. It means that you are doing things that you are not in charge of. Mm-hmm. You are yourself connected to the flow of the Tao, which feels to me like a cop-out. Right? Because it's saying, like, what is non-action? Non-action is just the stuff we like.
It seems like useful.
Action is the stuff we don't like.
But that's useful political rhetoric when you're trying to overthrow a king.
Yeah, anytime you decide that something happened and you want to say it was good that it happened, you can just say that it was a manifestation of the will of heaven. right? The mandate of heaven, right? And Mao had the mandate of heaven, and Chiang Kai-shek lost it, and so like it's functionally identical to just might is right. Whoever wins must be that must have been how it was supposed to go.
Must have been that guy. Yeah.
Well, and if nothing can happen outside of the Tao, is this a sort of determinism as well?
It's a sort of determinism by radical indeterminism. It's like, in that sense, that's how it's so easily weaponized by nihilists. And I keep thinking about how, Taylor, did you see The Dropout, the Elizabeth Holmes, Amanda Seyfried thing? Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's a scene where she goes to, I can't remember who the actress is, but she's trying to get her to tell her about how good her idea is for this blood testing device that she wants to invent. And she's like, do or do not, there is no try. And she's quoting from Yoda, and the mentor is like, that's nonsense. You're never going to, this is ridiculous. And so she just like changes her whole life around getting this slight piece of pushback and just like goes all in on do and do not, there is no try. And just like, putting hundreds of patients in peril along the way and ultimately ending up in federal prison. And
much like Yoda.
Now, I think that Elizabeth Holmes is great at non-action.
Yeah, she's a Tao villain.
Her ambition, it seems to be abstract and irrational and incoherent in such a way that it really does seem like she's being moved by something greater.
Yeah.
And that if she's sent to prison, the fact that it doesn't even seem to upset her, that she's behaving like a character from a Taoist story.
Is there a kind of level of autism you can have that reaches the state of the Tao?
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that there is a thing where since Tao says that you and everybody else are all part of this bigger thing, and that individuation is an illusion, I think it more or less ignores or even rejects the whole concept of being mentally or psychically different from other people. Mm-hmm. Right? The idea that there are people who can or can't do certain kinds of concentration or thinking or action in the world, right? This is the definition of a universalizing text. And so, no, there's no room in the Tao Te Ching for, mental difference, for autism or for depression or for ADHD or for anything.
Again, I'm always just thinking about things as methods.
I think it's true that we can't apply our...
I'm being silly is what I'm doing. And I think you interpret it as me not being a little silly.
How dare you?
What is the role of art under Tao? Obviously you're writing poetry and stuff, but what does a Taoist art practice look like?
Well,
you talked about the fluxus and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's the fluxus stuff and then there's the hippie stuff and the later cowboy stuff, like Harry Dean Stanton and his thing. Mm-hmm. Right. And then there's also, of course, obviously Taoist art and Buddhist art made in Asia by people who live there and, are not even interested in what, some white hippie in San Francisco has to say. Mm-hmm. Right. You have stuff like spring, summer, fall, winter, spring.
Yes.
Which is a great Zen Buddhist story. And then, then there's also all of those, Kung Fu and Wuxia stories that we discussed earlier. I think that, a Taoist would argue that any art is Tao, right? Because the thing about art and your encounter with it is that art asks you to merge more or less with the thing, incorporate it into your thinking and your experiences, and then to be changed by it. You can't change the art, but the art can change you.
I don't think corporate art.
Well, I don't. I think what you're saying is true that all art is the Tao if you assume that all art is art, which, as we covered a couple episodes on our Tolstoy
Yeah.
talk, we don't really believe.
We're still sitting that one out a little bit. We're still trying to figure it out.
Well, if Tolstoy draws a rigid, linear, distinction between good and evil, right? And he says people have an obligation to act morally in the world. He's saying that people have the intellectual capacity to make that distinction. And artists specifically have an obligation to make that distinction and then to act in accordance with it. Right? The Tao says, well, who's to say? And as much as we talk about these Silicon Valley types as rejecting moral consequences for their actions, because who knows, artists are way more guilty of this. Artists all over the world for all time. Every artist who ever lived refuses to be held morally accountable for their art.
Stand-up comedians especially love to do this.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so but there is a long tradition of Taoist comedy, but it is more clowning than it is language based. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think possibly,
Well, Buddhism has a lot of jokes.
yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah, that's possibly one of the major differences, right? Like
Yeah.
the Zen Buddhist practice of koans, of like telling each other jokes in order to understand the conflict inherent in the universe, very different from how we understand like Taoist traditions that are based on like an understanding of your place in your community and in the world and in the universe, and respecting this like hierarchy and this infrastructure and this bureaucracy that you're a part of. Right. And so then if there is comedy there, then it is a comedy oriented toward encouraging the individual to take themselves less seriously rather than poking fun, say, for example, at the ruler or at the society at large. So you end up seeing a lot of clowning.
Yeah, clowning. So maybe we should all look into becoming clowns? Could that be a way for me to find my way within this line of thought? I could become a clown?
I think you do see stories about clowns as being kind of Taoist stories, things like La Strada by Fellini or, Children of Paradise by Marcel Carné, right? Like you see a story about a clown, you see Monsieur Hulot in Playtime by Jacques Tati, and this is a person who's behaving as though they are an agent of the Tao. Right? They are not attempting to intervene in any kind of authoritative way. Their preferences, their norms, they are attempting to have a kind of philosophy is Stoicism.
It also makes me think about like situationism too, like doing a derive, right? And finding like using the sort of spontaneity of everyday life and moving with it rather than against it or trying to do something to it. So,
and the situationists also reject the like logical structure of language, just like the Taoists.
I think I'm going to become a clown team. I think this is my way in.
You are going to find a wealth of performers and performance.
No, I'm constantly getting emails for like clowning workshops. I get them all the time. I could just say yes.
But something I haven't quite identified. I was away in Iowa when this happened, but the post-alt comedy seeking towards something new and avant-garde did lead people back to clowning.
Yeah.
And there is now a whole clowning scene of people who are doing it like as art.
Yeah.
Right? Like high art.
Okay.
And that's why I think you will...
Well, French clowns in the 50s and 60s were pretty smug. They thought they were pretty hot shit, and they thought of themselves as artists.
I'm just thinking about the Hillary Clinton thing.
Yeah, right. That the ancient French clown who didn't understand why Hillary Clinton crossed an ocean to yell at him.
Women in comedy.
But in mime, I would say mime is an example of
Women in clowning.
French comedy that seems to have a kind of Taoist ethos.
Yeah. Well, it's very much like you said, like the thing, your happenstance falling into what is happening and doing it. Like, which is why, happenings in the 60s probably erupted from amongst the fringes of the hippie movement.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the appeal of this like system of thought and philosophy especially immediately following World War II, where the entire planet Earth and the entire human race had more or less been structured into this ordered hierarchy in order to, get to the end of this conflict, right? Everybody in the world was in one way or another an employee of the army, right? And so after that, you kind of like the idea of, what should I be doing with my time? Who knows? Just sit down. It'll be fine. You don't have to wake up early. You don't have to peel potatoes. You don't have to get shot at. You don't have to breathe, poison gas.
Well, being a soldier in a war seems antithetical to the Tao because you're not abiding by your own will, but you are acting on the will of the state. Like, you're definitely enacting a will. It's just maybe not your own.
Well, there are references in the text to like what makes the great warrior, and a contemporaneous text to the Tao Te Ching, something that was written also in the 5th century, was The Art of War by Sun Tzu, which similarly, you read it and it doesn't say things like Yukio Mishima talking about like keeping your body a perfect instrument or whatever. Like Sun Tzu's like, you know what the best way is to defeat your enemy? Sit next to the river. If you sit next to the river long enough, the body of your enemy will float by you. Right? It's espousing exactly the same kind of non-action philosophy as the Tao Te Ching.
Sort of like let them do it to themselves kind of thing?
Well, it's the idea that you individually are not the center of the universe. There are a lot of things going on. All right? And the tendency of the universe is to like destroy the ambitious, to cut the tall poppies, to hammer down the nail that sticks out. Right? And so the less you do, the less you will be vanquished and frustrated by a world that is not on your side. Because there are no sides. And that the idea that there is some kind of importance to the conflict between two nations or whatever is really just an illusion.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like nations themselves are illusions.
Right.
There's a Dracula Flow line. He says, I'm trying to explain to this cop that we're all just atoms, so he might as well let me go.
This shit ain't nothing to me, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think it is actually similar to the part in Brothers Karamazov, where the guy is like trying to bribe the guy to get into the room, right? The Grand Inquisitor part. And the guy's like, I'll take your money, but I'm still not letting you in. Like, I think that one of the things that Tao Te Ching is trying to teach you is how to be an effective and not tormented agent of the state. Like, hey, the state is all powerful, man. You're not in charge. Just do your thing. It doesn't draw the connection between individual action and state power. It's like, look, the state has been around forever. It'll always be around. Heaven is in charge of the state, and the state's in charge of you. All right, so, you are not in a position to like start a fight with a cop. There's nothing you can do to get out of your role as the people. And all of this stuff is for the benefit of the people anyway. So just relax.
Again,
That
seeing
feels
how
like
this could
a really-
get weaponized.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Just again, seeing how all of this could be so easily weaponized. It's just like, ugh.
Certainly, but I also consider that what Andres just presented to us to be a kind of elevated form of the, Western stereotype of Eastern philosophy, right? It's like broke. They believe in like sitting on a rock and just letting things happen. Bespoke. Everything is a civil service manual.
Yeah.
Every single Chinese writing ever has been teaching you how to join the government.
I think if you think of it like, what was it that made in this period where there's 100 schools of thought, like, why are we still reading the Tao Te Ching thousands of years later? Like, why did it not occur to us to do an episode about Mohism? Right?
Yeah.
Why aren't we not talking about Moji? And it's because it was useful for a very long time to teach people these ideas. And the people who did that stayed in power. It is, it teaches calmness, it teaches acceptance, it teaches going with the flow. And that's a very stable kind of ideology. It's the kind of ideology that'll last you a couple thousand years, right? An ideology of worship death and, go seek glory and, honor before, everything else. Like, that's the kind of ideology that can lead you to get your whole country, destroyed by an invading army. So, the warring periods leading to an era of stability is at least partially due to things like the continuation of ideas from Confucianism and legalism and Taoism, which all encourage you to do things like not rock the boat.
Yeah.
To respect your elders, to respect the authority of the state, and to, if you're unhappy or whatever, that's your problem. You need to deal with it.
By letting go of the things that you feel unhappy about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think there's a pretty cynical way to take the Tao Te Ching based, if we start from where we just did, that it's basically like, has anybody ever said this before? Perhaps it is a sort of opiate to the masses.
Yeah.
But you also speak of tradition in Taoist art of these mythologies and tales of people overthrowing corrupt leaders through, like, their the downess of it all,
The downess of it
by
all.
non-acting so effectively that they like impose their whole world, their will on the whole world. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know. And this goes back to the central contradiction of Wu Wei. I don't know where to land in between those two. In between, hey, chill out, what you yelling for, lay back, it's all been done before, and go get him, king. Go get him, tiger. Use your fucking force powers to choke out the
And that's
emperor.
what Elizabeth Holmes in those texts she had with Sonny was like, go get him, tiger. Like, she was doing that.
Gramsci says that you do both, right? You are pessimistic of the intellect and optimistic of the will, right?
Mm-hmm,
So you internalize all of these ideas about how powerful these structures are and how powerless you are and how, your own desiring is fruitless and et cetera, and how all of this stuff has to happen as collective action and how that is a reason why it may never occur. And you still get up every day and go out and you participate in the protests and you punch cops and you do what you need to do in order to make the world a better place, right? You act as though the things that you've discovered intellectually are not true. Which is to say you rest not on your own understanding, but you put your faith in this thing that's bigger than you.
Well, that sounds to me like a synthesis of what we'd previously called unsynthesizable.
Unsynthesizable and then also immediately synthesized.
Oof. Yeah. What I'm happy about this episode going so far is that we both understood how the sort of wisdom of this line of thought is beyond the historicity of its conception, but also the historicity of its conception is actually what makes it so applicable to everything.
We are having the exact same problems right now as Warring Period China.
Exactly. It's crazy. And it made me think like a sort of parallel thought is like to what you were just saying, Andre, about, so like, we're all figuring out how we would have behaved in Nazi Germany right now. Like, we're all doing that. And the answer is going to work and being sad all the time and afraid for our neighbors. And yeah, but what would be...
Well, the difference between us and them is that we have the burden of history. We know how this shit ends.
We know
and
how
back then
this...
they could just deny,
Well,
I
no,
guess.
that's what I'm saying. Like, the Tao Te Ching is the product of 1,000 years of writing and cultural traditions that led up to it. So they were already dealing with the legacies of history. Like, for them, that was like, okay, we are finally going to solve the problem of how should you live in the world. Here's the book. and then it didn't solve anything, and they immediately write more books. You know, I don't think that there is really a moment where you can say people suddenly feel the weight of history. You know, like all reason that human beings are capable of comes from analysis of the thing that came before.
Yeah.
It's how the brain works. You don't have thought without a past. Except the Tao Te Ching asks you to. It asks you to free yourself from the past and free yourself from worry about the future and to live in the moment, right? The Tao Te Ching rejects the whole concept of the materialist dialectic.
I'm reminded of that line from The Tempest. We are such stuff as dreams are made of, and our little life is rounded with a sleep. And it makes me think about the line as historicized in a sense, because it's like the dreams are our pasts, our imagined pasts, or what we know about our pasts. And then we have that knowledge, and then we die.
Yeah, but then also, you know, you never live, and then you live, and your death isn't really a death. And also you were already dead.
Yeah.
Well, does Illmatic give us an example of the Wu Wei then? When it says that life's a bitch and then you die?
Yeah, 100%.
That's why we get high.
I do want to say that
Despite the inevitability, we still do.
I do want to say that I think this actually, people will try to recuperate this for Beckett, and I think it's not. When Beckett says stuff that like is like what we're saying, he's saying it in an annihilative sense. So like, I can't go on, I'll go on means that you can't know how far you can't not go. Like it's the floor is just the beginning. Like you can descend so far, you can be so corrupted and so tarnished and annihilated, and it's endless and infinite. And so there's no actually like, but there's hope there because you're going on. It's like, no. You're going down. So I just want to make that clear because people might be like, oh, it's like Beckett. No, it's not. It's not like Beckett.
Well, I think that like mid-20th century existentialists more or less, like they reject the Tao because there is nothing that is imminent to the existence.
Yeah.
Right? Like we can't build the Tao if it doesn't exist. We have to be the product of the Tao if the Tao exists at all.
We're the sandcastle. Yeah.
Now you can't imagine a scenario in which the Tao is like a project.
Is this like going back to what we were talking about with Donald Rumsfeld? With unknown knowns?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Tao does sort of present the entire universe as a kind of unknown.
Yeah.
Right? You don't even know the things
You don't even know the shit you don't know.
Which
you don't know about.
that is a idea that is persistent across all of those texts that we're talking about from the 5th century BC. You know, Ecclesiastes and the teachings of Socrates. All of these, at the heart of them, is this thing where they say you think you know, but you have no idea.
Well, and there's that chapter here in the Tao where Lao Tzu talks about how the high clearance of military Humvees allows IEDs to be slipped under them relatively easily.
Yeah.
You can't force it. You can't just like lob a grenade at an armored car. You have to go with the flow and find its weak underbelly.
I think it is really useful to think about the Tao Te Ching as being the product of a people and a place and time defined by warfare.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say it's useful to think about. Never mind.
To think about how to blow up a Humvee? Yeah. I think that, like, if you see your life as being defined by war, right, then how are you supposed to imagine your place in the world? You wake up in the morning, you think you're living in hell, like you're being punished by God, right? And this is a period going on for hundreds of years where all life in the entire area is defined by really bloody, awful war. A universal, like, rejection of your ability to make those kinds of judgments could be soothing. You know, it could be comforting. You know, the war, maybe somebody wins and they're good, maybe somebody wins and they're bad, maybe you die, maybe your kids die. But just, you know, relax.
So is there a Tao to saying like, I'm just a girl,
I'm just a girl.
right? I'm just a small bean.
No, because a small being implies the existence of a larger being that you also contain. So no. Small beanism is actually, I would say, the opposite of the Tao, because the Tao, like you said, there's all these stories about like the Tao actually what makes things happen, and small beings can't have anything happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a kind of ruthlessness to the Tao.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, where this thing where like the worst things that happen and the best things that happen are exactly the same, you fucking idiot.
There's a solidity and a rigidity to that kind of relationship to flow and happen and like event, you know? There's a kind of like, if you're always going back to that, you're always going to be in that state.
Do you think that the Tao Te Ching is more useful to an individual or to a group? Like, we know, like, according to the lore, it is addressed to an individual, but...
So I think the way that all, like, both Buddhism and Hinduism and also this would have us, which is always like really frustrating to me because that's the wrong question. Like, there are very much such a thing as a wrong question, I think, in the Tao. I think the idea of the separate individual's relationship to the community is like a false separation, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, it's also not
to know but you, but yeah.
It's not a tool to be wielded. You are the tool to be wielded.
You are the tool, yeah.
Right. Like thinking that you as an individual have any idea what the right thing to do is.
We're all just James Maynard Keenan, you know?
Right. You don't know what the right thing to do is, which is why you shouldn't have desires.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I suppose the polarity between the individual and the collective is another one of those things that right at the beginning of the book, it says throughout those notions, because they define each other, therefore they're one.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
That is the guy from Tool's name, right? James Maynard Keenan? Or is it I always confuse him and The Economist.
I think you got it right.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I think that there is something that is really appealing, especially to teenagers, when it comes, like Western teenagers especially love to see this like incredibly different conception of how the human mind and the world should be organized. You know, it feels adventurous. It feels like, you know, like secret knowledge. It's, you know, it's like, it's esoteric philosophy. This is, you know, they're not going to talk about this in church. They're not going to talk about this in school. You know,
I think it's attractive to teenage boys in particular in the same way surrealism is, you know, like there's a kind of like, you know,
because
like
they're both in certain ways anti-authoritarian while also
not making you vulnerable. Yeah.
Well, you know, and giving you the ability to become a powerful person.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. Yeah. Whereas like, yeah, I think that's why that makes a lot of sense to me.
I think it does have a connection with surrealism and anything else from that is sort of like a reaction against Enlightenment project thinking, right? Where it says that, you know, you can't be the master of the universe, right? And so when we see, like, for example, Adorno saying that I'm just going to talk about my life, that makes Minima Moralia feel a lot like Chuang-Tzu. Right?
That's a really good
Because
point, yeah.
Chuang-Tzu talks about his personal experience, and it is abstracted in a way as to make it possible for students to gain something, even if he doesn't explicitly give you rules on how to live your life or like exercises to help you feel better or whatever.
Is it fair to say then that to know the particular is to know the universal?
Right, but it's not so much to know it. I think that would be the romantic, capital R romantic
You can never
Enlightenment
really
project.
know either the particular or the universal.
The particular and the universal are one.
But letting go of the distinction thereof?
Letting go of the distinction
Okay.
thereof. It's not about knowing it. It's about Yeah.
It's, you know,
I'm making gestures with my hands.
the humility of accepting that you're a lot more likely to have something valuable to say about a person that you spoke to on the train or about a sandwich you ate than about the universe. Yeah. I think the Tao does sort of encourage you to see everything on an equal level.
Right. Like William Blake would not be a Tao guy.
Well, we're definitely, I think, going to see a difference between this kind of talking and what's in the Holy Sonnets. Right? Because that's a very different relationship to hierarchy and mystery, right? Like, a big part of Taoism is this idea that there's the mystery, the great mystery, right? The thing that can never be solved, the thing that you are yourself materially a part of, the thing that directs the entire universe, that is infinite and deathless, but also incomprehensible.
I love thinking about the word mystery as this process. And it reminds me, it's like the opposite of the Roy Orbison song, She's a Mystery to Me,
Right.
where it's like, she's a mystery to me, mystery girl. Okay, so what you've understood about the fact that you're experiencing a mystery is that she's a mystery girl. You've essentialized it onto her, as opposed to a thing that you're experiencing. It's like the opposite of Roy Orbison.
All women are a mystery to me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. As opposed to like, she's a mystery to me, and then let's figure out what this mystery is, you know, and how
And the
I'm part
mystery
of it.
resides within me.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
I think Leonard Cohen and Tom Waits and people from that era have a more Taoist approach.
Leonard Cohen, I have a hard time ascribing Tao attributes to, because he's just so damn, like, Jewish, you know? Like, all his music is so, like, profoundly indebted to that tradition.
I think that sometimes the darkness and the sort of, like,
And Canadian.
he has a relationship to death in his songs as being like a kind of relationship to love, and which is sort of lateralizing. And I think if you listen to stuff like his version of The Partisan, you know, you get this sense that the misery of heartache and the misery of living through war are all really just the same thing, and that they're sort of inherent in how human beings live their lives. And I think that, you know, if there is a thread in 20th century, you know, music and literature and stuff that is about Tao, then it is this like rejection of the idea that these romantic 19th century kinds of stories offer anything to the world, and that the reality of human life is something closer to a Coen Brothers movie where stupid shit and wild, miraculous coincidences happen, and it isn't like because there's a God looking out for anybody.
Yeah.
It's just that's how it goes sometimes, and what are you going to do? And you see this in Big Lebowski, I think.
Yeah. No, this is why they're also so interested in McCarthy, Cormac McCarthy.
I think more or less there is a kind of like ideological hegemony when it comes to certain Taoist principles in Western art starting at the end of World War II.
Yeah, I think that's right.
You know, like hewing too close to romantic ideals in that period does make you seem a little out of touch and old-fashioned.
Yeah.
That aligns with my hypothesis that I'm growing, which is that probably others have already said this. I'm ignorant, but postmodernity really like begins, maybe not in its full form, but it begins right after World War II, right? The
That's
contradictions
what the
have been
Frankfurt
laid
School.
so bare.
That's what we learned from the Frankfurt School. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Deleuze says as much in
Exactly.
Cinema
That's
too.
like the whole. That's
Gotcha.
very much the
Gotcha.
dominant strand. Yeah.
Right.
Although, didn't we learn though when we were reading the Hegel that late capitalism?
Minimum morality.
Oh, I'm sorry. When we were reading the Adorno, that late capitalism is, if not postmodernity, late capitalism started.
Yes.
Way before then. Yeah.
I think that if you define late capitalism as the point at which the developing the productive forces ceases to be progressive, I think the Holocaust is a great example of that.
Which is
You
like
can
that's
point to
generally
that.
understood. Like that's pretty much
Okay.
Like, yeah.
Well, I'm caught up then.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I mean, the Warring States period is likewise a period of technological development, constant warfare, horrible human suffering, the strengthening of the state. I mean, it has a lot in common with the beginning of the 20th century, right? War atrocities and things like this. Great natural disasters as well, earthquakes and famines and floods. I think that there is a certain kind of comfort in a philosophy of go with the flow when, your entire village has been washed away in a flood. Or everyone was murdered by an enemy army, or your children died because you didn't have rice. In that scenario, you want to believe that there is, even if you can't comprehend it, you want to believe there's a bigger thing going on.
Yeah.
Do you mean to say that all ideology, regardless of time and geography, is downstream of the human experience?
Well, Taoism would say the opposite.
What do you mean by downstream?
I just mean that, we form our ideas about the world after we have our experiences
Maybe
of the world.
this is why
Yes.
Mohism didn't take off, because Mohism says that. Mohism is essentially materialist dialecticism. It says people are the way they are because of the situations they find themselves in.
Mohism is the philosophical study of where to find a man to hug and kiss.
Yes, it's what they're doing down at Jackhammer.
Wait.
Continental philosophy is, I think, incorporates feminist theory in order to make the critique that experience is a priori to any ideology, and we have to always remember that for practical reasons, but also this is just something that feminists have been talking about forever. So yeah. And also the subaltern.
I don't know about you two, but that was about all I had to say about this text. Do you want to, do you have anything else you want to talk about before we wrap it up?
Hold on, there's this river. It's storming on top of me. Just give me a second. I'm gonna wait for it to subside.
Okay, we're gonna just take a little 1,000-year break, and we're gonna come right back.
I do have a closing remark, but I want to wait for our frontline heroes to pass us by.
Yeah, we're getting a little bit of an ambulance and I think possibly a fire truck.
Doesn't seem to be very aligned with the Tao. What are you in a rush for?
Oh my God. I'm creating a comedy character right now. It's a Taoist firefighter.
What's going on is that ambulance is actually carrying a corpse of your enemies, and they're waiting until you're next to the river so that they can dump it in the river.
The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The podcast, which can be liked, shared, and subscribed to, tagging its creators on social media, is not the eternal podcast, but it is Virtue Signal.